Welcome to the Mount Alvernia Live Chat. We are now live across Instagram, Facebook, as well as TikTok. So my name is Poh Ping Qi and I'm a clinical psychologist with Mount Alvernia at the Alvernia Psychological Health Clinic that actually opened last year. I'm so happy that everyone is joining me at this lunchtime hour as well to have a chat about our topic today, right? So today we'll be talking about coping with examination stress. So I'll be sharing and answering some questions about mental well-being as well as coping during the really stressful examination periods for a lot of the students, right? So whether you're a teenager tuning in, or whether you're a parent with a young child, or even an adult who's taking your classes in tertiary education, I'm sure many of you would have experience or even some concerns during that journey. So during the session, feel free to drop us, any questions or any comments that you have. It doesn't matter which platform you are on, and I'll work with the team so that I can answer you as many questions as possible today. Okay, let me see. Okay, so maybe just a quick intro about myself as we wait for some of the questions to come in. So I'm a mother of two daughters as well, and my eldest actually just entered primary school this year. So I was also, in a whole conversation about examination stress with a lot of the mothers. I've been a clinical psychologist for I think close to 12-13 years as well. So I've also had seen, quite a handful of patients, I think especially in the more recent years, when, we're really kind of, working with high stress environments within a very Singapore context as well, where sometimes there's still a very traditional view on academic success. So I think we do see an increasing trend as well of children recognizing that, hey, this is something that's quite overwhelming for me. This is something that maybe I need extra support in. And I think a lot of times the parents in this generation, like myself, we came from, a generation where we were thought to kind of just, bury our head and just get through it, and I think it's also now recognizing with, the digitization of the newer generation with, a lot more expectations on them. As parents, how can we also kind of think about better ways to support our children's mental health, as they kind of go through their different learning education phases? Yeah? Okay, so we have a first question that came in from Instagram. So this person was asking, I feel guilty whenever I take a break because I think I should be studying. Is this normal? Right, so I think a lot of times it's because we see studying as the direct action that you can do in order to get the outcome, right? So if I want to get good grades, then I have to study. But I think we also fail to recognize that taking a rest is as important as part of studying. I think this is very similar to one of the patients I've seen recently, a teenage patient that I've seen in the clinic. So if you think about it like a swimming competition, right? There is a goal, there is an ending that we want to get there, but you need to learn to come up to breathe. You can't just keep kicking in the water and just trying to get to the destination. So I totally think that, we will associate with studying, the more time we put in, it almost feels like it equates to better grades. But I think at the same time, it's recognizing that taking that breath, learning to pause for a while is as important, because it does allow for whatever time that you have clocked in studying to also have a chance to kind of register in your brain, right, to develop that permanence rather than, just kind of burying your head and keep going through it. So having sufficient rest, good amount of sleep, even taking the time just to have a good meal, that is also very important and will help, build better study habits as well. Yeah? Okay, let's see whether there's another question coming in. Hang on. Okay, so this is also another question from Instagram. So what strategies can help manage perfectionism in children who put excessive pressure on themselves to score near perfect grades? Okay, so this actually sounds a lot like my eldest daughter, and this is not backed up by study, but I do feel anecdotal evidence have shown that, certain children do have a temperament that makes them, more sensitive, sometimes also almost displaying some perfectionistic tendencies as well. And I think we want to recognize that when these children, when they have the tendency to be perfectionistic, it's not so much of wanting to achieve good results, but to them it's that fear of not doing well or the fear of making a mistake, right? It's almost like any mistake cannot be tolerated. And I think the main question we want to ask is, where is this coming from, right? Is the wanting to get that perfect grade, does it equate to maybe some form of, I don't want to disappoint the people around me? Or is it associated with like self-acceptance within their, community? Like, everybody is doing well, so I need to prove that I can also keep up, I can do, like, where is that perfectionistic tendencies coming from? Like, if we dig deeper into their thought processes, what is your child saying, right? And I think we want to look out for certain flags, like, are they starting to impact on the way they see themselves? Like, they might say things like, oh, I'm going to fail, there's no point trying. Or they might even say things like, oh no, I'm such a stupid person. So we want to make sure that, all these perfectionistic tendencies are not impacting negatively on the way they view themselves. I think that's when we need to start being a bit more concerned. But then, so that's part one of it. Part two is going into the strategies. So I think it's once we recognize where it's coming from, right, then we want to be able to, as a parent, I think, have that conversation, right, about, this concept of being perfect, this concept of always, being at the forefront, is something that's really not very sustainable, right? If we think about it, we want to be able to encourage our children in terms of growth, right? So we want to create an environment that talks about the growth mindset rather than like that fixed mindset. It's not about the outcome, but it's what you do in terms of your effort, your perseverance to kind of move through the different exams, through the different periods in their learning education life. Yeah? I hope that helps with the strategies. I think one thing I also talk about is we need to help our child develop maybe certain ways to help them regulate. So I think this might need a little bit more context on how old they are as well. I think if you think about it in an adult capacity, like, we have ways that we kind of regulate or, have downtime. So I think it's equally important for us to figure out for our children what are some strategies that work for them, right? Are they more a sensory person? Are they more of like, if they engage in something else that helps them to regulate? So we want to find something that can really anchor them, that allows them to feel like, okay, this is my safe space, and in this space, I feel like I'm able to regulate better. So then we want to be able to kind of, titrate between, having time to study and then going back and forth and constantly, emphasizing on that growth mindset. Yeah? Okay. A question from Facebook. So how do I know if my child is feeling stressed? So I think some things that are a bit more obvious. So this will probably be for like the kids that are more, I would say, are really quite stressed out. So you might see a little bit of anxiety, sort of panicky symptoms, right? So they might tell you things like, I don't like to study, or this is too hard. So there might be some avoidance, right, in relation to academic stuff. The other thing is we might also see maybe changes in their behavior as we are leading up towards more stressful examination periods, right? So some of it could be through very somatic symptoms as well, like physical symptoms, right? So they might have like, more frequent stomach aches too, they might feel more fatigue, they feel very tired from studying. So those may be certain signs to watch out for. I think, of course, if your child is starting to express like, I'm worried about this, we don't want to dismiss, any sort of worry they have. You want to find out a little bit more how intense, are some of these feelings for them, right? So at this time, I also want to quickly do a quick introduction and saying hi and welcoming our new joiners who have joined us for the Mount Alvernia Live Chat as well. So again, my name is Ping Qi. I'm a clinical psychologist with Mount Alvernia at the Alvernia Psychological Health Center. And today our topic is on coping with examination stress. So for those of you who have just joined, or even those who have already been with us on the live, just drop in your questions on the comments and I'll try to get to them, yeah? Okay, this is another question from Facebook. My son can answer all my questions during revision, but freezes up during the paper. Is this exam anxiety, and how do we help him retrieve that memory under pressure, and will it get worse over time? So I think this ties in a little bit to that earlier question on how do I tell my child is stressed, right? So I think if you feel like, your son is actually able to answer questions during revision, but during the paper they struggle to be able to answer some of the questions, I think it does tell you that there's a little bit of that difficulty, he might be freezing up, he's jamming up really, right? He's not able to remember or retrieve the knowledge that he has been revising, with you, right? So I think my question back is actually, is this a time pressure thing, or is this like a exam situation? So let's say if he does revision at home, but if it's like being timed, right? So let's say 30 minutes and you give him 30 minutes and okay, get through this paper, do we see the freezing up still, or it doesn't happen, right? So I think that's one question I had. So if he only freezes up during exam, meaning at home doesn't matter how you do it, once he goes to school and when he sits in the exam hall, and then that's when he freezes up, I think definitely the anxiety is more related to that. Almost to children, it feels like, this is real, right? This is the consequences. At home, there's no consequences even if I get it wrong, but in the exam, they have magnified their consequences for themselves, that this is very important, I have to get it right. And so it's almost like that pressure is so overwhelming for them that the brain's natural defense mechanism is, I just freeze up, right? So how do we help him retrieve it? So I think firstly is to help to manage the anxiety, right? So we want to, help him build up more coping strategies. Like I said, depending on the age again, we need to find what are the coping strategies that might be helpful for that particular age group. So I would say, just off the top of my head, right, with primary school children, we want to do a lot of illustrative, a lot more body regulation exercises, right? So it could be like the slow breathing, deep breathing. It could be like muscle relaxation, some of these exercises to really help them gain more awareness of how their body is responding when they're stressed. So hopefully then with more practice, it helps to translate in a real life situation when they're taking the exam. For the second part of your question, when you ask, will it get worse over time? I think it depends on what age your child is at, right? So if your child is pretty young, like, in the lower primary or even upper primary, as he or she gets older, depending on the academic stress and how they cope with it. So if they continuously perceive the consequences to be very magnified, if I don't do well, all of this, negative thing is going to happen to me, then yes, it may get worse over time. So I would suggest, this is something that you would want to have a conversation, with a child about. If you feel like it's something that, you need additional support in, that's also potentially, looking for guidance externally in how to be able to help your child. One more question from Facebook. What psychological techniques can help children who suffer from mental blocks or panic during the actual exam? Okay, so this is in relation, I think, similar to the early question as well. So I actually have some papers here that maybe I can just do a quick show. These are all resources that you can find online. I don't know how much y'all can see through the live chat. I can ask them to kind of pop it up when we do a recap or something. But it's really going through a lot of breathing techniques, right? So this is box breathing, which is very similar to a lot of the adults. If you have a Google Watch or Apple Watch, the little calming button that does the expanding, the decreasing. So it's really going there, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in and breathing out. So with kids, a lot of times you want to use visual. So it can be through use of squares. It can be called star breathing. We also have your finger breathing. So there's a lot of all these resources online as well. When you Google breathing techniques for children, that you can actually look up on. The other thing is also we try to do a lot of grounding techniques, right? So when we say grounding techniques, it's really helping the child remove themselves from the negative thoughts that's going on in their heads about how much they would fail. This is too hard. I'm not going to do well. We want to remove them from all this thinking and really try to ground them in that present moment, right? So we want to get them to focus a lot inwards into how their body is feeling. So this resources is actually my 5 senses. We have adapted it a little bit, for younger children as well. So we get them to, describe things like 5 things that I can see, 4 things that I can hear, 3 things that I can touch, 2 things I can smell, and then 1 thing that makes me feel happy or makes me feel loved. So at the end, it's kind of like a positive affirmation as well, right? So with a lot of young children, when they kind of do this, they actually momentarily remove themselves from all the negative thinking that they have. And then with the last one, it's kind of like a motivational sentence for them, either I just need to try my best, I've really done what I can, right? and to focus on what makes them feel happy, right? And then kind of reset again, right? I think on that note is also to talk about a lot of times we want to be able to help our children kind of change the way they think about things. Children like to, use a lot of very absolute words, right? Like, oh, I'm no good, I'm going to fail, right? It's almost like it's for sure going to happen. I think also letting them know it's not about the failure, right? Like, what is it that you can control? What is within your control, which is the amount of time and the amount of effort that you have put in. And once you've really done that, you really can't control for how it's going to be like, So as long as you've already done what you can, then we'll just see what happens, right? And then we can always kind of look back and like, okay, now we know this is what happens, okay? So then what's next? What's always that growth mindset? What is it that we want to work on next? What do we do next, right? There's never like an end goal to like, if you do badly, then you have failed. Yeah. Okay, another question coming in from Instagram. So this parent is asking, how can I manage my own stress and anxiety so that it doesn't unintentionally overwhelm the child? Okay, as I'm thinking about this question, I feel like there's a few different contexts. So I also want to make sure it's as relevant to everybody. I think firstly it's our anxiety and worry, like why we anxious and why are we worried? Is it that our child is not doing well in school? Is that part of why we are anxious and worried about it? Are we anxious and worried because we feel like our child is not putting in their best effort, right? So I think it based on how it is contextually, then the strategies is also a little bit different, right? So if our child is, we feel like they're not doing well, then I guess it's maybe helping them develop. Perhaps like I would imagine for a lot of the teenagers, studying is no longer as straightforward. There's involved a lot of critical thinking, a lot more higher order reasoning as well, right? So it's not like, you can just mug your way through school, right? And I think with a lot of times, sometimes as parents, we want the best for our children, right? So we really want to know how much can I kind of push in a little bit? Should I be telling them that, hey, how are you doing in school? Right, so I understand that as parent myself as well, right? How we want the best for our children, but we want to see what is it that they're actually doing in school, right? In terms of, are they doing okay, and how much of it is what we think their potential is as well, right? And what is the gap that's happening, right? Is it a lack of effort? Is it some studying blockage? And where is that coming from, right? So I think once you figure that out a little bit more, I think it's then re-evaluating on your own anxiety, like how are you able, I guess, to help your child or support your child in the way that suits them, If you think about it, if I flip the narrative, as adults, when we are upset about certain things or when we are stressed out about certain things, we cope with it differently, right? Some people like to go grab an ice cream. Some people like to, go out with friends. Some people like to stay at home and read a book, right? But what helps us is when we have people that know what we need and can meet us where we are, right? Sometimes we might just need a shoulder to cry on. So the same thing for our kids. We are worried about them, but we want to be able to ask them, hey, what can I do for you? We don't want to be the one, to be thinking about like how to problem solve all the time as well. I know it's very easy for us to do that because we've been doing that, when they were young, right? So as they are getting older, I think it's also for us to recognize we can't always have a solution for them. We can't always tell them like, hey, maybe try this, maybe do that. But I think it's also asking our child like, okay, I see this is happening. What can I do? What do you need from me, right? And we keep reassuring them, right? I think a lot of times our children can sense our anxiety, can sense our worry. So is our worry coming from a place of like their grades, or are we like what is it that we are worried about? So when we evaluate that, then we can also think about how to better approach, supporting our children. Yeah. Okay. We have a comment from TikTok. Every time I sit down to study, I feel so overwhelmed that I end up scrolling on my phone instead. Yeah, I mean, nowadays phones are such an easy way of coping, isn't it? I think a lot of us actually do use our phone as a way of coping, right? It's either like it's a distraction, like we just scroll through, or sometimes we gain, certain positive emotion from certain reels that we are watching, or from certain content as well, right? So I think the thing is, right, if studying is tough for you, is it because we are trying to, is there an expectation, right? What about the studying makes it draining, right? And I think it's going back to that steps. What is it that I can break down, perhaps for me, that's easier for me to do, right? I think a lot of times with studying, it's a momentum thing also. There's a lot of inertia when it's something that we don't enjoy doing, right? So if we don't enjoy doing and almost feels like this is really tough, I mean, it's totally understandable why we have a natural tendency to then just avoid it. But if we recognize that this is something that I just need to get through, this is something that is important for me, then how can I help motivate myself to be able to get back into that momentum, to push through the inertia, right? So if you, there are some people who do enjoy like the Pomodoro technique, right? Which is if you study for maybe, let's say 20 minutes, then you take a break for 20 minutes and then go back studying for 20 minutes. So you need to find something that works for you, right? It could be a motivation, like if I can get through this, then this is what I can reward myself with, right? So it's how do you find something that would give you the extra push to stick to a certain sort of discipline or a certain sort of structure. Yeah? Okay. Next question from Instagram. How can I show my child that I'm here to support them for their studying and exams without making it feel like I'm micromanaging them or adding extra pressure? So I think this is quite similar to the earlier question as well. I think a lot of times when we think about, studying, support them for their studying or exams is checking in, right? So I think it's the way we check in. So sometimes when we ask too much and our kids will be like, stop asking, like why you keep asking me about school? But I think it's also recognizing that do we engage our children in other conversations as well, right? I think, are we making all our conversations about school, right? Sometimes it's also asking them like, hey, what's something funny that happened in school today, right? Because when I mean, this is what I get from my parents and our generation as well. They're just like, or how is school, or sometimes they might not even ask, but I think now we are a lot more curious about, how our children are in school, but we maybe need to be a bit more intentional in the way we ask questions as well, right? So you can be like, oh, hey, what's going on today, like what was something funny that happened in school, what was something that happy. So from young, I would say if your children are pretty young, it's good to have those kind of conversations already, just to create more sharing that's outside, of just academic stuff as well. Right? And I think after that, if, once they're already a bit older, you want to show support, it's really asking them like, hey, can I get you something while you're studying, right? So sometimes we might see them studying or we might see them having exams coming up, like, okay, what can I, cook for you for dinner today that might be more helpful? Hey, do you want me to bring you a snack later, right? So we want to be able to also look out for their other needs, not so much of just, how their progress is coming along. So I think, again, I want to caveat by this really varies depending on the temperament of your child as well. With certain kids, sometimes they might need more. With certain kids, they might not need so much. So I would say it's a very delicate balance, right? As parents, it's not easy. It's really not easy to figure out that balance. But sometimes when we really don't know, we can just ask our child, our kids, like what can I do? How can I be more helpful, right? Okay, another question from Instagram as well. I can tell my sister is stressed from exams, but I don't know whether to distract them or give them space. So again, quite similar to what I said. Perhaps ask her, right? Hey, what do you need? Like, you can actually tell her, like, I feel like you're quite stressed. Because sometimes we're also helping them become aware of how they're feeling, because they may not know that they look stressed, right? Hey, I see you, spending a lot of time studying. I see that, hey, maybe you're a bit more irritable today. Like, how are you feeling? Like, are you feeling, very overwhelmed? What can I do? How can I help? Right? And you can give them options as well. Like, hey, do you want to go out tonight? Maybe, just take a break from studying. So I think a lot of times we in our head feel like we need to have a solution, but we really don't, And I think the best way to support someone is really knowing what they need, and they would know better as well. Okay, we just have 5 more minutes left in our time today. Thank you so much, everyone, for being so forthcoming and open with your questions. I can take 1 or 2 more questions, so feel free to leave any questions in the comments as well. Okay, one other question from TikTok. I'm the type who will stress eat during exam periods. Anyway, that same, that's me. I need to eat. My mouth needs to be moving when I'm studying. It helps me think, right? I think again, your stress eat is at what level or what intensity are we talking about, right? When I was a teenager, I would like stress eat one whole packet of like chips. You know, it wasn't healthy, right? Definitely I recognize that. And so it's like, is it something that can be replaced, right? Is it, for you, does it matter what kind of food you are stress eating? Or is it just like if it's just junk food, then I would say, okay, maybe that's something we might want to move away or find something to replace. But for you, if it's just about, you know, moving your mouth, it's a sensory thing, I don't think it's a major problem, okay? But if you feel like, I feel like if you're asking it, probably it has, you know, been flagged up by people, or people might have mentioned it to you. I would say sometimes it's about chewing certain things, right? So replace with something healthier, replace with something, you know, maybe like more nutty yogurt. If it's crunchy, things would be nuts, right? Walnuts, things like that. If not, we just have to find something else that copes similarly to that level. So if it's a chewing thing, I would feel like you are a pretty sensory person, right? So some other replacement things could be like, you know, clickers, right? So I have a period where I'll be clicking on my pen if I'm thinking. So that also helps me think. So you kind of experiment with a few more sensory based sort of regulation stuff and see whether that's anything that can be helpful in terms of replacement as well, yeah? Okay, alright, the last question is from Facebook. So my son gets frustrated and gives up easily if he does not know how to do it. Is there any way as parents that we motivate them? So I think this one is also to understand like how long has this been going on? Is this fairly new, like the giving up? So a lot of the kids, especially nowadays, in the clinic we do see quite a few children as well as teenagers coming in. And I think a lot of times when I speak to them, the idea behind giving up is that if I don't do well because I didn't try and I give up, then I can always say that, you know, I didn't put in an effort, right? Versus like for them, they feel like, oh, you know, I studied so hard and I still didn't do well, right? Then that to them is a bigger impact, a negative impact on how they see themselves. So a lot of children would kind of choose that avoidance and that giving up because it is a protective mechanism. To them, it's just like, I can rationalize and say that, oh, I didn't try, right? So I didn't try, I give up. So I can't say that I'm stupid. It's just I didn't put in effort, and that's a very default way of managing it. So I think the first thing is to help them recognize the frustration, like why are they frustrated when they can't get it right? What is the thought patterns associated with that? So I'm feeling frustrated because I think I'm stupid, or I'm frustrated because I feel like this is too hard, I will never get it, right? So we want to watch out for the things that they are saying to themselves internally and to help them to kind of unpack that a little, right? Because a lot of all these thinking patterns that our children are getting, you know, whether unintentionally from ourselves, right? The things we say to them, from teachers, from their peers, from social media, right? It's so easy for them, you know, to develop a certain idea about what they need to be, or the kind of grades they need to get, or how they need to behave in a certain way, right? So it's recognizing what is the thought pattern that they are having, you know, that makes them feel frustrated, right? And I think as a parent, once we know that, then it's in a way easier for us to kind of help them, you know, find that gap. Like, hey, okay, you get frustrated because it's too hard, right? You feel like this is too hard. How can we make it easier, right? How can we break it down for you? Then we can, you know, go in from there and support. If they say like, oh, I'm frustrated, I'm giving up because I'm stupid, I don't want to try, I'm going to fail, I know I'm going to fail, right? Then we want to reassure them, okay, it's not about the outcome, right? We are not focused on that. Let's just try, let's just show up, let's just be present, right? Let's just do 10 questions and we see, right? And it's about helping them rebuild that confidence to slowly gain that momentum and get motivated. Yeah? All right. Thank you so much everyone for being so forthcoming with your questions and for joining me today during your lunch break. I hope that, you know, you managed to learn something today, and for those of you who are going into the exam season, you know, even for parents as well, you feel a little bit more prepared in supporting your child. For the teenagers as well as the adults, you feel a little bit more assured too. In case you missed any of our segments, we also share some of the cut downs of the video on our social media. And if you need any other further specialized advice, you know, feel free to reach out to us at Mount Alvernia Hospital. On that note, actually, the Alvernia Psychological Health Center would also be doing some emotional workshops for children. So this is up and coming, so feel free to look out for those as well. And lastly, please follow us on all our socials, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, in order to stay informed for all the upcoming live sessions as well. The next one will be end August. Okay, so see you again.